There are two terms you'll hear a lot when you're in recovery: X factor and dry drunk. And both of those things, they kind of interconnect with each other. Your X factor is the reason you started drinking, the thing you were running from, or the thing that caused you trauma. A dry drunk is someone who stopped drinking but didn't figure out what their X factor was. If you subscribe to this idea, a lot of counselors will tell you that unless you get to the root of your drinking problem and then confront it, you're still sick. You're just not medicating. You're a dry drunk. I get asked that from time to time, what my X factor was. I actually never even thought about it until I went to rehab. And if you've ever been to a rehab program, you better believe they bring that up a lot. Constantly they bring that up. They print it on the damn signs in the doorway. What are you running from? It's annoying, but it's true. You're running from something when you're in addiction. In rehab, they usually start with your childhood, and for the longest time, I always said I didn't have a bad childhood. And I guess I didn't. Comparatively, I didn't. My mom bought us whatever we wanted. My dad didn't beat us. Christmas and Thanksgiving at my aunt's house, a couple of trips to Ocean City when we were kids with my cousins. All in all, it was essentially normal enough. But with that being said, it never occurred to me till much later in life. If everything was so normal and everything was so on the surface, why did I hate being home so much? Why did I move out of my parents' house the absolute first chance I got? And why did it feel so right the first time that I got drunk? When I was 19 years old, I dropped out of college and I started working at a restaurant. That's where I met Diane. Diane was a waitress there and had this incredibly unbelievable story. She was 16, and her 14-year-old sister, they lived by themselves in this apartment near the restaurant because they had slipped through the cracks in the system. They've been on their own for over a year now, going to high school, working, and having a ton of other young people living with them. It's an almost unbelievable story, and if I didn't live it, I would think somebody was lying if they told me it. This apartment became known as 7 East. We named it that because of the street that it was on. I've talked about 7 East before, but this was the origin of it. I ended up moving in there, and this was the party apartment when I was younger. That's how we looked at it then. A place to do drugs, drink, and have sex. But it was more, and we didn't see it. That apartment was just this black hole for trauma that just pulled everyone in and united us. All of our horrible childhoods were being processed subconsciously through different substances and experiences. We were just too young to notice. Diane's father wasn't in her life, nor was her mom. I was running from my family, and my buddy Jeff got in a fight with his stepdad and he moved in. Those were the three main players in the cast, but there were dozens of others that came by every night. Some even lived there on and off. All of us being compared to more successful family members, or ignored by our parents, or knocked around at home. Just trauma piled on top of trauma. But we all found each other in that little apartment. In some sick, unmodern way, it really was magical. For those 4 years, all these people just congregated together, and the common bond was misery and a desire to escape it. And we were a family. These were some of the best memories of my life. But through it all, I never questioned, why did I want to leave my parents' house so badly in the first place? I thought that it was normal. I thought kids just outgrew their parents and seeing them as a chore. And I understand it's semi-normal. No one loves seeing their parents that much because no matter how old you are, they still treat you as a kid. But it was more than that for me. I anxiously didn't want to see my parents. I would hide on holidays, get upset if I had to talk to them. I wanted nothing to do with them. And I thought that that was just the natural progression of things. It was Sarah's family who showed me how unusual that was. Sarah's got a huge family tree, her mom's side and her dad's, because her parents weren't together. She talks to her aunt and cousins frequently, her children called her all the time, and her sister was her best friend. Sarah's actual family was like the fake family I had manufactured at 7 East. She was the same with them as I was with all these people at that little apartment. But what got me was the fact that her kids talked to her. They wanted to come home for the holidays. They came to her for answers to life's questions. If she called, they picked up. These kids wanted to talk to their mother. And what's worse, and I hate myself for this, is I actually made fun of Sarah's family for this at the beginning, for being that close. I thought it was weird. I didn't understand why every family event she dragged me to, it had to involve her aunt, her uncle, her cousin's children, some other aunt, and her boyfriend, 2 other half-cousins, some people from California, and on and on and on. And this was just like for a cookout or something. This wasn't a reunion. This was a Sunday. It took me a while to warm up to Sarah's family, and it's not because there was anything wrong with them. It's because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand them. That's what I said anyhow. That was the act I put up. I made fun of it, and I said it was weird, and I avoided it. But the reality is, I didn't think it was weird at all. It was endearing. These people loved each other. They relied on one another, and truthfully, I knew I didn't think it was unusual. I was more confused by why my family wasn't like that. It honestly never occurred to me that her family was normal. Mine wasn't. And I never questioned it. I never questioned it because I didn't realize it until I got sober. And then my mom died, and I started looking at stuff. And when I looked, I saw a bunch of stuff I didn't really want to see. I realized that my mom, she spent her whole life covering up my dad's porn addiction. I remembered things my father did to me as a child, bad stuff, and that's why he wasn't very close with me. I learned that what he was doing ruined her life. I realized my mom worked around the clock to keep all this from my brother and me, and that her whole life was an act, and everything I knew was basically a lie. And slowly, I started to recognize what my X factor was. And I finally saw what I was running from all those years ago. All those people at 7 East with their childhood trauma. And back then, I never thought I belonged. And suddenly I realized I fit right in like it was my birthright. So now, with this new information in front of me, I had a choice to make. But this time, the choice was a little easier than when I was 19. There's a term that they used in rehab, professional victims. These people who use drugs, drink, and screw over everyone, and then rely on their horrible past as an excuse for it. They use their childhood trauma as a past to get people to feel sorry for them, so that way they could just live without consequence. And I've discovered that I have absolutely no patience for people like that. The things that happen to you in your life, they either feed you or they eat you. It is completely that simple. You get better or bitter. You hold on to your tragedy, and then you remember how it hurt, and it makes you try harder to make sure the same things don't happen to others. Or you get bitter and want to make everyone hurt like you do. And then once I realized that dichotomy, I looked at everything differently. I could now see people emotionally punishing their children because of their own childhood, just like their grandparents did to their parents and their great-grandparents before them. Trauma passed down over and over again, inherited from generation to generation like eye color. Nobody learning, nobody getting better, nobody thinking to kill the bloodline. I don't know what happened to my father to turn him the way he did, or to make him do what he did to me. Just like he didn't know with his father, or his father's father, and so on. I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care. It wasn't going to solve anything, or take back what he did to me. I can't change what already has happened, but I can sure as hell stop it. I can stop it now, and I can start a new bloodline. And it starts with Blur. I feel bad for Blur sometimes, man. I really do. He doesn't get the easy path. Not with me. His father isn't in his life, and Blur could have easily used that abandonment and anger as an excuse to do nothing when he got older. Very well could have turned out that way. Sat around and got into the drug scene, been awful to others and blame his absent father. But then I had to go and get sober and kind of adopt him. Now, this poor kid is being called on to carry heavy stuff upstairs for other people, hold doors for girls, and give up his seat on buses for strangers. He's nicer to his mom. He does his homework. He knows to clean off cars when it snows. He's being held responsible for his actions. like a man and not a victim. I'm impossibly proud of him. He's going to be the best. He really is going to be the best. And I get to be there to see it. It's hysterical because when Blur reads this later, he's going to be let in on a secret that I've been keeping from him. I've been keeping it for the last 4 years, actually. The reason I kept going as Men in Black with him every Halloween for so long is because there's a line in that movie that always stuck with me. It describes everything I'm doing with Blur and envelops why he doesn't get the easy path with me. I'm not training a partner. I'm training my replacement. When I was drinking, I surrounded myself with other people who drank, and we would get drunk and cry or fight or have sex with as many women as we could, all of us just pushing our misery down or taking it out on others. That little apartment was a magnet for it, and we were too young to realize it. Anguish attracts anguish, and I don't think that's who I was supposed to be. I was doing that to myself, but I don't think it was ever me. I was just running. It took me 42 years to figure out who I was. I'm embarrassed by the fact that I was kind of a professional victim through my 30s. I used losing my job as a teacher just as an excuse to do nothing. But I try not to think about it, because if I did, it would just give me more reasons and excuses to feel sorry for myself. And like I said, I have to kill that bloodline. I have to get to know this new person I'm becoming. This is who I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be there for Blur and for Sarah and for my stepkids. Everything before this was the act. I kind of realize that now. I was just wandering around looking for this life in these people. This weird group of people that I used to think were so confusing, they've become my family now because I've learned something through all this. I learned to stop acting, stop running, and stop looking for people. Just be yourself. It's like I tell Blur, be yourself all the time, completely unapologetically, and the right people will find you.